Hi, welcome to Spektral Evidence. I'm Kyle.
And I'm Harry.
Tonight we have Tom Lynch and Julie Williams from ParaTom. Hi guys, how you doing?
Good, how are you?
So, first off, why don't you tell us how you started?
Well, that goes back some years, Kyle, and I'll tell you, when I was a kid, I used to go to Lexington and Concord with my grandparents, and every year we would go to see the North Bridge, and if you've ever been there, they have the grave of the British soldiers, and that was my highlight of the day. And I would go and I would just know that that little swatch of soil actually had redcoats buried in it, and I was always amazed to go there knowing that they were in the ground. After we would leave that area, we would go to some of the old colonial cemeteries. And I like to tell people that I'm a tapophile. A tapophile is somebody that enjoys the graveyards and the carvings and things like that. And, you know, my grandparents would walk through the cemeteries, and every year I would follow them in. And I kind of remember the first time seeing the grave of a little boy, a little colonial boy, and kind of bending over saying, hey, if you don't like where you are, you can follow me home. You can be my friend. And I remember that night, I was home, I had my eyes wide open. I was afraid the thing was actually going to appear. But that was the birth of me sitting in cemeteries. So ParaTom is an offshoot of my time sitting in cemeteries with a tape recorder and a camera and just taking photos. But I always made sure I was out of it before dark. And
Right.
As I got older, it started getting darker and darker. And so you'd start doing overnights in the cemeteries, and so all these things that were happening. This is long before the television programs and that made it popular. And my parents thought I was totally insane.
So did you actually have a paranormal experience before you started going the technical route?
I've had paranormal experiences before I knew they were paranormal experiences. I remember sitting there in the cemetery with a tape recorder, not really listening to for voices of beyond, but as I sat there, I was listening to the birds and just the wildlife and just the area. And as you played back a cassette, you would be getting these things that sounded almost like somebody talking on a CB radio. Now we're talking back in the 70s, and that's how you would kind of place it to that technology back then. And it wasn't digital back then, it was the micro recorders. And you were considered fortunate to have one of those because they were very expensive. Mm-hmm. But I think the first real experience that caught my attention, and I'm going to call this my first investigation, was my wife and I were at my wife's grandparents' house, and Uncle Lucian had just passed away. Now, a lot of people that know me know the story of Uncle Lucian's bell, and he had a trach before he died, and he would use it to communicate, to say, hey, I need help. And the night of his funeral, after we had him buried, the two of us went over to the grandparents' house just to spend some time, and we were watching some television, low level volume, and all of a sudden we heard a bell ringing upstairs. Melissa's grandfather and I both looked at each other, went up the stairs. The bell continued to ring as we came around the corner. It was acoustically correct. And the bell was ringing. As soon as I touched the doorknob, the ringing stopped. We went in. The bell it was a brass bell. It was sitting on the television next to the bed. And there was the faint coat of dust, not that they were messy housekeepers, but the natural setting of the day. I remember picking up the bell, and here's the very instant of my first investigation, was picking up the bell and just looking to see if there was any scrape marks, any movement within that dusted area, and it was just like it. No, so that started making me think, what powers, what forces made that bell actually resonate without moving the bell? Something broadcast that sound. And I studied that one for the longest time.
Didn't freak you out?
Yeah, it didn't freak us out. It was like, wow, that is supposed. I mean, we all heard it. There were 4 adults in the house. We all heard it. So that was the one that said, okay, something's up. I believe everybody has a aha moment, and that was mine.
So when did you first decide to really form a team?
Well, see, that's the misnomer. We don't have a team.
Okay.
You know, you hear of people with the groups and this and that, and we don't have that. It's always been myself. And a few years ago, I started taking on, you know, Julie's a medium. I've had a couple of other mediums.
Harry's a double X. Oh.
He's a double X. But and what I do, Julie notwithstanding, I handpick my team as I need them. So I have a bank of people that I can call and say, hey, do you feel like coming and helping me out on this? I'm a freelance paranormal investigator.
So do you yourself do an initial investigation before you bring in people?
We interview, and you know, we go in and we'll interview the homeowner or the business owner or the landowner. And when I say we, it's initially Julie and I. Julie was somebody that actually I met through one of our investigations. I was planning on doing an investigation. I started calling a team. It was what they called a haunted barn in Danville, New Hampshire. And this woman kept calling saying, hey, I'd like to do an investigation, and leave the message. And she would send emails, hey, I'd like to go on this investigation with you. And I was like, well, you know, I get a lot of people asking to do this, and I don't want to start training people. I use psychics and people that I know that I can trust in somebody else's home or what have you. And she was very persistent. And a medium that I used in the past said, hey, you know, Julie Chopis was her name at the time, is, you know, she's interested in doing an investigation. She's a good kid. I said, well, who is it? I don't want to be taking people on. And she said, she's a good kid. So one day she called. I was unguarded. I answered the phone. She goes, hey, did you get my emails? I've been looking. I said, all right, you know what? We have this thing coming up on Friday night. Here's the rundown. Meet us at the Dunkin' Donuts over here, and we'll bring you along. So that night, everybody showed up, and she showed up, and I said, you stay close to me, and we'll just, you know, we'll show you how it's done. I guess you had toured with like bigger groups type things?
Until that point, I had only done
Like the pay to get in ones, right?
the public events with 20 or 30 people. And, you know, everyone does things a little differently. Some people more for show, some people more for entertainment. But I needed to get into, I needed to know what was going on. I needed to.
Well, let me ask you this. Let's go back a little bit. When did you find out you had, what's the proper word to call it?
Sensitivities?
Sensitivity, okay.
Excuse me.
When did you find out you were sensitive?
My whole life, I just knew things. And my mom was always open to it. She was sensitive, her grandmother was, so it was okay to talk about. I mean, growing up, you didn't talk about ghosts. People didn't believe in ghosts. You kept it quiet, and it was discussed at home only. Didn't discuss it in front of my brothers, only in front of my mom. But my first real experience, I'd say, really knowing something was different, was probably when I was about 16. I had a friend that had passed that came back and visited me one night in my dreams, but it was a dream that was so real, I couldn't explain it. It was that he was there. You know, it wasn't just, you know, a dream is foggy, but this was just so real. And at that point, I just, you know, there's more to this. There's something going on. And so I probably started just reading what I could read whenever I could find it. And through my life, I've had phases of Sometimes it'd be super sensitive, other times there'd be nothing there, you know, as life gets busy, you don't think about what's going on.
Right.
And just in the past few years, I really started to pick up a lot of things. I've started to have a lot of experiences, and I just said, you know, okay, that's when I started to search more actively for someone to investigate with, or someone, you know, to get the answers, because I said, either I'm losing it, or there's something really, you know, to this. And that's what has led me down this path so far.
Tell them why you picked me. No nonsense. We don't play.
Exactly,
We don't
right?
bring giddy kids into it and
Yeah.
With
things
the
like that.
investigations I had done at that point, like I said, public events, you always have the 6-year-old or the 8-year-old with a flashlight in your eyes, and at that point, I'm realizing that I have more gifts and talents than other people have, and so I'm trying to work with that, but it's distracting when there's so many people around, so I wanted a small, no-nonsense kind of, this is how we really do it, and so it's kind of a...
I had no idea they had these pay-per-investigation things where people would go to pay to go do an investigation. I had no idea. We were doing the real deal, and they, you know, she was telling me, oh yeah, people pay to get into that. What are you talking about? But you try to kind of understand where the, you know, what's up with the money part of it, you know?
Yeah. So when you guys are doing an investigation, a real investigation, you're more tech, obviously, right? You're more spiritual, sensitive.
I tried to.
You guys ever butt heads?
We are the odd couple in the paranormal world. I mean, I'll tell you, I have my, you know, I'm psychic too, to a degree, but it's not controlled. And, you know, this one here, she'll say, I practice this or I practice that. I practice blurting. When I see something, I let the person, like if your grandfather was behind you right now, I'd tell you, hey, can I ask you a question? Is your grandfather dead? Well, let me tell you, he's standing right behind you, and he's waving his arms, and he wants you to know this. You know, whether you're ready for it or not. So she gives me the old kick under the table every time. But
The first thing we're taught not to do when we're at class, when I go to the spiritualist church, and I've been taking classes and learning to open up in that.
But to answer your question, people have asked me this before. I've done a lot of radio programs and things like that. And one of the questions always comes up, do you use mediums on your investigations? Yes, and I'll tell you why, is because that medium is going to pick up what my equipment can't with such detail. We did a funeral home about a year ago, and this one here for some reason stands out. The report was one of the mediums saw an old woman sitting in front of a window in a chair.
The dog room over here, we call it the dog room.
What do they call this room?
We call it the dog room, because it's all her dog.